Well, here's another video from Multimedia Science, this time about the energy conservation demos. These simulations illustrate the conservation of energy and the change of energy from one form to another. The objects that are simulated include a dropped ball, a pendulum, a spring, and a roller coaster. A final simulation illustrates how a bounced ball loses its kinetic energy and gravitational energy to heat. In each simulation, the variables, like the height for the gravitational potential energy, can be measured or are given. So in this particular case, as you rise the ball up, you can see that it gets gravitational potential energy, and when you drop it, it loses the gravitational potential energy and gains kinetic energy. You can either show the numbers or hide the numbers. There's also a separate copy of the simulation where there are no numbers, and there's a student handout that you can use with that simulation that students have to take measurements and fill in the answers. So if there were no numbers here, for example, the students would have to measure the height above the ground and then figure out from the final velocity what the kinetic energy was, and from the height what the gravitational potential energy was, and then in the lab report see whether or not total energy was conserved. Basically, the simulations show that it doesn't matter what the situation is, the same energy conservation occurs. In this case, you can start and stop a pendulum and measure the height, the gravitational potential energy, or the velocity, and do the calculations to show that the total energy is conserved. Same thing with the spring. There's also a separate simulation for the spring that illustrates the change in the spring potential energy as the spring is compressed and uncompressed. One of the more interesting simulations is the dropped ball. Here, if the elasticity is 0, we start the ball. You can see that, boom, all of the energy is converted directly from gravitational potential energy to kinetic energy and then to heat. We can reset it. We can make the ball 100% elastic. And now none of the energy is lost to heat, and it just goes back and forth between GPE and KE. Or we can set it somewhere in between and see that, probably a more realistic case, that some of the energy is lost to heat every time the ball hits until all of the original gravitational potential energy is gone. So these are very good simulations to illustrate the conservation of energy for a number of different situations. Here's the answer key to the student worksheet, where for each of the exercises they have to do a number of calculations. They have to answer a number of questions. They need to show their work, and you can hand this out with a simulation that has no numbers, so that the students have to do all the calculations. So if you're interested in getting more information on the energy conservation demos, please go to Teachers Pay Teachers at this URL. You can also find a number of other physics and chemistry applications, games, labs, challenges, and a number of teacher tools and game making software. Thanks for watching.